like so frequently, so it's not like you can just keep pushing it, but like morphine just keeps going. But when it's time, a person can just push the button and have it directly delivered to their blood system or their bloodstream rather than waiting for a nurse to show up. So there are actual technologies that have been developed that make it easier for us to control suffering and pain symptoms. And then as far as suffering goes, there's a whole myriad of amazing technologies that have been created to help alleviate pain and stuff. Not pain, I'm sorry. Like I said earlier, like sores, nutrition, hydration, all sorts of things like that. Going to the bathroom, believe it or not, that'll cause a lot of suffering if you can't do that correctly when you're dying. But yeah, there's a lot of different areas where this is in the medical system specifically. We're talking about that, where these things are actually already happening, but where they're not happening in black and white. There's a lot of gray zone. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Courtney?
I guess one of the things I'm kind of wondering is if there's some disadvantages of increasing comfort over cure in terms of treatment. Like, I understand it's a personal decision, but if you increase the cases where someone is just aided in dying, wouldn't that also reduce opportunities for research? Because most of these curative processes where someone is extending their life, I'm imagining they're testing new treatments, or there may be over time you're going to improve your ability to cure somebody.
So what I think would probably be the case there is that you're not reducing the opportunity for curative treatment advancement or research, that you're probably going to be having less randomized populations to do those studies with. So it's going to be a lot less people probably over the age of like 70 in those drug trials, or it's going to be a lot more people who are like in their 20s and 30s who are still fighting for life a certain way, or you're going to be hitting certain socioeconomic levels for people who, because there's also a fun little statistic that I think 70%, 60 or 70, some astronomical number percent of healthcare expenditure in the United States for an individual happens in the last 6 months of life. And so there's also, that can't be ignored in all of this, that and it is because of those curative pushes, like let's just throw in the kitchen sink and use everything we can to try to fix this. If there are situations where people can't afford that and instead decide to transition into hospice, they're not going to be in those studies probably either. So I don't think that we're going to reduce the opportunity for curative treatments or even for experimental treatments, because there will always be people who prefer that, because for some people that is their dignity. Like I said, it is a subjective process, and sometimes fighting until the end is the most dignified way to go for a person, and that includes using all those curative options. It's more about the choice factor here. So it's not pushing hospice onto somebody or palliation onto somebody, but rather facilitating it if that is something that they decide to do. And it might even be a situation, I think, another thing that's going to become more common is people who do choose to use those curative treatments up to a point and then decide to transition into hospice. Again, it's not black and white. I think people will use both, but still end up in palliative care and hospice rather than dying in hospitals. So. Anybody else? All right, ladies and gents.
All right.
Oh, one more thing before Karen talks. I just wanted to say thank you. I was going to do this after your questions because I didn't want to lose your train of thought with the conclusions there, but thank you so much to my beautiful committee, to Karen for being so very patient with me and taking me under her wing when I was just a really sad little squirrel in a rave. To Erica for being so incredibly candid with her comments and for being witty. And then Nikki was actually on my committee for my undergrad project, so it's really cool that she's back for this one too, and helping with her amazing background. And then also to my own support squad. You guys are all here, it's so cool. And to all of the doctors, nurses, hospice care workers, social workers, and advocates who try every day behind closed doors and in quiet ways to make something peaceful and beautiful out of an otherwise unbearable process. And one more thing to leave you with, this is a quote from a doctor in the United States who's highly lauded. He's won a lot of awards for his hospice care work and palliative care work and surgery, but it's just that death with dignity is our attempt to deal with the reality of what is all too frequently a destructive process. Death is destructive by its nature, and disintegrates humanity, and that he does not see, this was written years ago, much dignity in the process by which we died, and hopefully we have made improvements since this quote was written about 15 or 20 years ago, and hopefully we can keep moving forward after this and with future studies. So, that is all. Now you can go.
All right, we're going to take a brief stretch break, and then we'll come back with committee questions.
But let's clap for her